For years she lived in the echo of what was the quiet assurance that her era of passion had definitively passed. Approaching a major milestone birthday, her future felt charted, a landscape defined by memory, not desire. But fate rarely respects timelines. He arrived, a disruptive force, bright and undeniably younger, offering a vibrant new beginning. Suddenly, the carefully constructed walls around her heart began to crumble. The risk is immense, inviting judgment, sacrificing reputation, defying every rule she thought defined her second act. This is not the life she planned. This is infinitely better and utterly terrifying. The scent of old paper and freshly brewed coffee had become the unexpected fragrance of promise for Vivian Holloway. 49. For the better part of a decade since the year 2013 had brutally carved a void in her life, she had viewed her future through a narrow, duty-bound aperture. Azalea Manor, her quaint, traditional southern home, meticulously maintained yet emotionally sterile, had served as both sanctuary and prison. She lived for memory, not for the vibrant possibility of tomorrow. That rigid structure was slowly, irrevocably being dismantled, brick by gentle brick, by Ethan Kincaid, 36. Their connection, which had begun weeks earlier with the abrupt shattering of her solitary routine at the book signing encounter, was unlike anything Vivian had ever known, even in her previous, deeply satisfying marriage. It wasn't the comfort of shared history. It was the thrilling, terrifying discomfort of shared intellectual terrain and raw emotional recognition. They were sitting in the Mariner's Compass, a historic building filled with dusty classics and local art, tucked into a pair of comfortable but slightly worn leather armchairs near the back window. The late summer 2024 light filtered through the panes, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and casting a golden halo on Ethan's easy smile. He radiated an energy, a genuine curiosity about the world and her that felt almost blinding after her years in the shade. "You read this passage 3 times, Ethan observed, his finger tracing a line on the well-loved binding of the collected poems of Rilke. It was a book exchanged. During their first intimate discussion, a physical anchor for the depth of their intellectual meeting. The one about learning to love the questions themselves. Vivian closed the book softly, her sharp but often guarded eyes meeting his clear blue gaze. "It's unsettling. I spent so long believing I had the answers, or at least believing I knew what life was supposed to look like after everything. Certainty was safety." Ethan didn't offer a platitude or a rush to fix her. He simply tilted his head, acknowledging the weight of her words without judging the source of her grief. "And now? The uncertainty is freedom, isn't it? Albeit a nerve-wracking freedom." "It feels like trespassing," Vivian confessed, her voice barely a whisper, glancing down at her wrist. The silver locket, a piece of jewelry she always wore, felt heavier than usual today, a constant, cool reminder of her past commitment and the silent judgment she imagined emanating from it. It symbolized duty and memory, and in Ethan's presence it sometimes felt like a reproach. Ethan reached across the small table, not to take her hand, but to gently touch the edge of the Rilke book. "Vivian, you are defined by the life you are building now, not the life you were mourning 10 years ago. And certainly not by the number of years you've spent on this planet." That was the crucial, terrifying difference. Ethan saw past the number on her birth certificate. He recognized the complexity, the intelligence, and most startlingly, the vitality she thought had been extinguished. He treated her like a current, vibrant possibility, not a historical monument. Their meetings became frequent, not dates in the traditional sense, but collaborations. They discussed architecture, philosophy, and the strange, quiet beauty of the coastal town they inhabited. Ethan, an artist and photographer, had started working on the unfinished canvas, a large, abstract piece depicting the volatile intersection of the sea and the sand. He brought it up to Azalea Manor one afternoon, setting it up in the structured, somewhat isolated garden. "It needs texture," he stated, stepping back. "It's technically proficient, but it's missing the emotional grit. You see the grit, Viv. You live it." Initially resistant, Vivian found herself drawn into the collaborative process. She suggested colors he hadn't considered. Shades of deep indigo and rust that reflected the hidden melancholy of the ocean floor, blending her reserved posture with his dynamic optimism. It was a partnership, a physical manifestation of their merging worlds. But the closer she got to Ethan, the louder the whispers became internal and external. The external pressure materialized in the form of Clara May Jenkins, 50, Vivian's lifelong friend. Clara May was practical, well-meaning, and embodied the conventional wisdom of their tightly knit community. She arrived at Azalea Manor one damp September afternoon, ostensibly for tea, but her worry lines were deeper than usual. "Hey's lovely, Viv," Clara May began, stirring her tea with unnecessary vigor. "Truly, Ethan is a delight. So energetic." "He is," Vivian agreed, smiling genuinely. Clara May leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "But darling, the age difference. It's significant. People are talking. Not maliciously, you understand, but with concern." "Concern about what?" Vivian challenged, though the question tasted like ash in her mouth. She knew exactly what the concern was. Is she making a fool of herself? Is he serious? Will this end badly? "Concern that you're setting yourself up for heartache," Clara May admitted, protective of Vivian but fundamentally bound by societal expectation. "A man that young, full of that much life, what happens in 5 years? 10? We just want you to be safe, Viv. You've earned stability, safety, solitude. Stability. These were the gods Vivian had worshipped since 2013. The thought of retreating to the safety of that solitude almost convinced her. The fear of being judged, of setting herself up for public scrutiny and eventual pain, was a powerful, paralyzing force. She feared the whispers, yes, but she feared the truth behind the whispers even more. The suggestion that passion held an expiration date, and hers had long passed. The internal conflict reached a crescendo as Vivian approached her 50th birthday. Ethan had insisted on organizing a small private dinner. This was to be the birthday dinner crisis. The restaurant was elegant, quiet enough for conversation. Ethan was luminous in a dark jacket, holding himself with an easy confidence that seemed to defy the heavy silence Vivian carried inside her. They were joined by Clara May and 2 other couples' longtime friends who, like Clara May, meant well, but had been marinated in the same conventional expectations regarding love after 50. The conversation started pleasantly enough, revolving around local gossip and the usual social pleasantries. But after the main course, perhaps fueled by too much wine and the underlying tension of the unspoken, the societal scrutiny began to close in. Ethan inquired Mr. Harrington, one of the longtime friends, his tone overly jovial. "You're a wonderful artist, truly. But I must ask, with your schedule, do you ever worry about, well, the future, the long view?" Ethan met the question head-on, unruffled. "The long view is what I look forward to most, sir. I'm building a life, not planning a week." But the focus shifted relentlessly to Vivian. Clara May, intending to defend her, only exacerbated the tension. "Vivian is so deserving of happiness, after everything, but we also want to be realistic. This age gap, it requires a certain resilience, doesn't it?" The implication was clear. Vivian at 50 was fragile and foolishly chasing a fleeting moment of youthful affirmation. A wave of icy shame washed over Vivian. She felt exposed, scrutinized, and suddenly profoundly old. The judgment, the unsolicited opinions, the concerned head tilts, they were exactly what she had feared. Her carefully constructed narrative of dignity and duty was being reduced to a scandalous midlife indiscretion. She looked at Ethan, waiting for the inevitable crack. The moment he would realize the pressure was too much, or worse, that she was too much. Too complicated, too guarded, too burdened by her history. But Ethan didn't waver, didn't get defensive, nor did he shrink away. He reached across the table, taking Vivian's hand in a grip that was firm and anchoring. "The only resilience required," Ethan said, his voice dropping slightly, cutting through the clatter of silverware and the buzz of nervous chatter, "is the resilience to disregard external noise. What Vivian and I have found together is rare. It's an intellectual match, a shared emotional language, and a profound respect. I don't see an age difference when I look at her. I see complexity, brilliance, and a depth of character that I admire more than anything in the world." He turned to Vivian, his blue eyes intense, filled with undeniable affection. "I recognize a woman who has closed herself off for a long time, and I am honored that she is choosing to open her life up to joy again. If that choice makes others uncomfortable, that is their reflection to face, not ours." The room went silent. The societal whispers had been confronted, not with anger, but with the sheer, undeniable authenticity of their bond. But the damage was done. For Vivian. The confrontation had solidified her oldest fear, that loving Ethan meant public scrutiny and potential ridicule. Despite Ethan's steadfast declaration, the fear of judgment almost convinced her to retreat. The safety of solitude beckoned. She spent the rest of the dinner silently, politely, but retreating inward. Later that night, back in the silence of Azalea Manor, the structure of her life felt like it was fracturing. She held the silver locket tightly. Duty, memory, past, grief, they all warred against the raw, vibrant feeling Ethan had reignited. She sent him a text message late that night. "I need space. I need to think." Ethan, perceptive and persistent yet gentle, didn't argue. He knew that the only path forward required Vivian to choose herself, to choose vitality, without his presence as a shield. Vivian spent 2 agonizing days in seclusion, the heavy humidity of the coastal town mirroring the oppressive weight of her dilemma. She walked the perimeter of her meticulously structured garden, pacing the familiar paths she had walked for years. Was she strong enough to withstand the judgment? Was the potential joy worth the certain criticism? On the 3rd morning, before the coastal mist had fully burned off, Vivian drove the familiar route to Sullivan's Cove Pier. This remote, scenic spot, known for sunset views and quiet solitude, was where she often went to grieve. Now she went there to choose. She arrived just as the sky was turning from bruised purple to soft rose gold. The air was cool and salty, and the sound of the gentle waves against the pilings was the only noise. She pulled out her phone and found Ethan's number. She didn't call him to break up. She called him to apologize for her fear and to commit. But before she could press the call button, she saw him. Ethan was standing at the very edge of the pier, his silhouette sharp against the emerging sunrise. He wasn't looking at the sea, he was looking at her. He held his camera and tucked under his other arm the unfinished canvas. He walked toward her, not running, allowing her space, but moving with determined inevitability. "I know you asked for space," he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the vast morning air. "I honored that, but I couldn't stay away from the sunrise. I brought this." He nodded toward the canvas. "I realized something important about it." Vivian stared at the painting, the abstract swirl of indigo and rust they had collaborated on. It was incomplete, waiting for the final definitive stroke. "It represents the past and the future, battling each other," Ethan explained. "The heavy colors are the memory, the structure. But the light colors, the possibilities, they need to be claimed. And I realized I couldn't finish it without you, because the vitality isn't just in the paint. It's in the hands that apply it." He set the canvas down gently. He didn't mention the dinner, the judgment, or the age difference. He focused only on the present moment and the shared future. Vivian touched the silver locket one last time. It was a tangible link to her past, a reminder of the beautiful, lost love. But she realized that honoring that memory did not require suffocating her capacity for current joy. Duty did not demand isolation. Looking at Ethan, standing there unconcerned with convention, offering her not just his love, but the opportunity to rediscover her own vitality, she made her choice. This was the sunrise confession. "Ethan," she began, the word catching in her throat, thick with years of unexpressed hope. "I'm so terrified of being judged, of setting myself up for failure, of being predictable in my tragedy." He took a step closer. "And what about being unpredictable in your joy?" Tears welled in her eyes, tears not of sorrow but of release. "I never sought this, never planned it. I was ready to accept quiet solitude. But life doesn't ask for our permission to deliver beauty," Ethan responded softly. "You don't just deserve this, Vivian. You are this. You are this vibrant, complex woman who closed the book on romance, but who has now found a profound, undeniable love that simply happened." Vivian finally let go of the silver locket. She didn't take it off. She simply released her grip on its restrictive symbolism. She stepped toward him, choosing authenticity and vitality over the safety of solitude. "I choose the unpredictability," she affirmed, her voice gaining strength, echoing across the cove. "I choose the sunrise." Ethan's radiant optimism surged forward, merging with her rediscovered strength. He didn't kiss her immediately. He just held her, a long, encompassing embrace that confirmed everything the others had questioned. This was not a fleeting affair or a desperate grab for youth. This was two souls, regardless of the difference in their calendars, irrevocably recognizing their other half. That morning, with the sun fully over the horizon, painting the coastal town in shades of powerful gold, Vivian Holloway, 49, fully committed to Ethan Kincaid, 36. They drove back to Azalea Manor, the place that had once been her fortress, now feeling like their shared home. They spent the afternoon finally completing the unfinished canvas. Vivian chose a brilliant, uncompromising shade of azure color of absolute confidence and applied the final strokes that connected the chaotic energy of the seafloor, her past, grief, with the boundless expanse of the sky, their future. The painting, once merely abstract, was now a powerful affirmation of their collaboration, a shared piece of art symbolizing the second act of her life. Vivian realized then that the whispers would never truly stop. Societal norms were deeply ingrained. But standing beside Ethan, looking at the finished canvas, she understood that the depth and authenticity of their bond was stronger than any external pressure. The profound, undeniable love that had taken hold was a powerful affirmation that passion holds no expiration date. She had not only rediscovered romantic love, but she had recovered her sense of self-worth and feminine confidence. Love after 50 wasn't planned or sought. It had simply become inevitable, a vibrant, powerful second act that she was finally ready to live, defiantly and joyfully. Their shared future, built on Rilke, unfinished canvases and unflinching support, was wide open. The commitment made at Sullivan's Cove Pier that cool, sun-drenched morning was not merely a romantic promise. It was an active rejection of 10 years of enforced emotional austerity. Vivian drove back to Azalea Manor feeling lighter than she had since 2013. The quaint, traditional southern home, once maintained with the meticulous, sterile precision of a museum, now seemed to breathe a little easier. Dust motes still danced in the shafts of sunlight, but they danced over piles of paint supplies and scattered books, signs of a life being actively lived, not merely preserved. The silver locket remained around her neck, but its symbolism had shifted. It was no longer a shackle of duty, nor a silent reproach. It was a memory, incorporated into the living tapestry of her present. She had chosen vitality, and vitality demanded space. The months that followed, stretching from late autumn into the deep chill of coastal winter, were characterized by a powerful, quiet intimacy. Ethan moved through the house with an easy familiarity, setting up a temporary studio in the sunroom, leaving traces of cobalt blue and turpentine scent that mingled unexpectedly well with the old southern mahogany and potpourri. Their collaboration extended far beyond the unfinished canvas, which now hung triumphantly in the central parlor, a bold, defiant splash of azure among the muted antiques. Their shared language, forged in the worn leather armchairs of the mariner's compass over Rilke and philosophy, translated seamlessly into the domestic sphere. One crisp November afternoon, Vivian found Ethan sitting at the antique writing desk she rarely used, sketching blueprints for a renovated garden structure. "You're supposed to be designing," she teased, leaning against the doorframe, watching the way his brow furrowed in concentration, radiating that genuine curiosity that first drew her in. "I am," he countered, looking up with that perpetually easy smile. "I'm designing our space. You mentioned wanting a better spot for the camellias. This house is beautiful, Viv, but you've kept it perfectly preserved. It needs growth. It needs to look forward." Vivian walked over, tracing the outline of a new pergola on the paper. "I was afraid that if I changed anything, I'd lose the memory of what was." "You honor the memory by living fully, not by remaining stagnant," Ethan said, his tone gentle, utterly devoid of judgment. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the skin where the locket rested. "You've spent so long carrying the weight of the past. Let me carry the paint, the lumber, the excitement for what's next." That was the essence of their bond. He offered her not a replacement for her past, but permission to claim her future. He didn't dismiss her history. He simply insisted that she wasn't finished writing her story. The difference in their chronological age became an amusing background detail rather than a defining feature of their relationship. Intellectually, they were perfectly matched. Physically, the gap simply did not exist. For years, Vivian had felt like a vessel of duty, devoid of sensual self-recognition. Ethan saw her body not as nearing its 50th year, but as a map of experience, a source of profound, intelligent beauty. He treated her with a devotion that rekindled a confidence she thought had been extinguished decades ago. She started wearing richer colors, allowed her silver-streaked hair to fall more freely, and met the world with less guarded eyes. But the world, particularly their small conservative coastal community, was not so easily won over. The societal scrutiny, though temporarily silenced by Ethan's declaration at the birthday dinner, only retreated to the fringes, regrouping for the holiday season. Christmas 2024 brought the pressure back, sharper and more insistent than before. Clara May, Vivian's lifelong friend, was the conduit for this pressure. She didn't mean to be cruel. She meant to be protective. But her protective instincts were entirely rooted in conventional wisdom, which dictated that a woman nearing 50 should be settling into comfortable routine, not embarking on a relationship with a man 13 years her junior who lived life with the vibrant zest of an artist. The incident occurred during the annual community Christmas open house. Hosted at Azalea Manor, a tradition Vivian had reluctantly maintained since 2013. Ethan, dynamic and genuinely warm, was perfectly capable of charming the gathering. He talked architecture with the local historian and art with the few younger attendees, navigating the subtle, judgmental atmosphere with unshakable grace. Clara May cornered Vivian near the dining room, her warm eyes heavy with worry lines. "Vivian, can we talk? Just for a minute?" Vivian sighed internally but managed a calm smile. "Of course, Clara May. Everything all right? I just worry about logistics, darling," Clara May whispered, leaning in conspiratorially, as if discussing classified state secrets rather than a boyfriend. "I was talking to Gerald, the attorney handling my mother's estate planning, and the conversation turned to assets." Vivian stiffened slightly. This was the territory she feared most. The professionalization of their relationship. The reduction of their profound connection to a matter of legal and financial vulnerability. "Vivian, you have Azalea Manor. It's a significant asset. It's yours, completely. But when you start involving someone else, someone who maybe doesn't have the same established career path, or long-term financial stability, Clara May, What are you implying? Vivian's voice was low, laced with cold steel. Clara May flinched, recognizing the boundary she had crossed, yet feeling compelled by her own anxieties to push further. I am simply implying that you need to protect yourself. People talk, Viv. They whisper about motives. Is he settling? Is he looking for security? You are smart, complex, intelligent. But sometimes, love can blind you to the practical realities of such a significant age difference. Gerald offered to draft something, just something simple, a way to keep things separate, to ensure safety. The word safety hit Vivian like a physical blow. Safety, solitude, stability, the gods of her past decade. Clara May was offering her a neatly wrapped, legally sanctioned retreat back into isolation. She was inviting Vivian to view Ethan through the lens of suspicion and vulnerability, rather than trust and shared future. Vivian took a deep, steadying breath, the scent of cinnamon and old paper heavy in the air. She glanced across the room. Ethan wasn't scheming. He was helping an elderly guest steady her cup, listening to a rambling story with genuine attention. Clara May, Vivian said, her voice quiet but firm, carrying the weight of the choice she had made at the pier. I appreciate your concern, truly. But you are looking at my life through the lens of fear and financial caution. I am looking at my life through the lens of vitality and possibility. She paused, letting the statement sink in. If I enter this relationship, or any relationship, from a place of anticipating failure, distrusting the other person's motives, and drawing legal lines to protect myself from an imagined heartbreak, then I am not living. I am merely guarding an empty shell. I refuse to treat Ethan, or our bond, with that level of suspicion. My safety is not defined by my property deeds. It is defined by my choices. And I choose to trust. Clara May looked genuinely dismayed, seeing Vivian's refusal not as strength but as foolishness. But what if things go wrong, Viv? You're risking everything you've built since 2013. I'm risking living, Vivian corrected softly. And if it goes wrong, I will handle it. But I will not let the fear of potential pain prevent me from accepting undeniable joy. The intensity of the exchange, conducted under the guise of festive cheer, served as a crucial turning point. Vivian had verbally dismantled the societal expectation embodied by her friend. She had chosen trust over safety, authenticity over caution. The emotional grit Ethan had sought for the unfinished canvas was now visible in her posture, her words. The holidays passed, and their relationship deepened further, moving toward the date that stood as the final public frontier. Valentine's Day 2025. This wasn't just a day for sentimental gestures. For Vivian, it was the moment they would officially, publicly, and defiantly affirm their bond to the community, challenging the residual whispers once and for all. Ethan, perceptive as always, understood the psychological significance of the date for Vivian. He didn't want a quiet, intimate dinner. He wanted a statement. January was cold and wet, perfect for cocooning at Azalea Manor, reading Rilke by the fire and discussing their upcoming plans. Ethan was unusually secretive about the Valentine's Day plan, only dropping hints that it involved the mariner's compass and a complete lack of subtlety. Vivian felt a resurgence of the paralyzing fear. What if he makes too big a scene? What if the judgment is unbearable? Despite her strong words to Clara May, the idea of public scrutiny still terrified her. She was accustomed to the anonymity of grief. Visibility was unnerving. She voiced this anxiety one afternoon, watching Ethan meticulously clean his camera lenses in the sunroom studio. "Ethan, about the 14th, she began, fiddling with the chain of the silver locket. "I know you want to celebrate, but please, keep it contained. I don't want to draw attention to us. I just want a quiet evening." Ethan paused his work, his clear blue eyes meeting hers. "Contained? Why? Are you still worried about the Harringtons and their opinions on my long view?" "It's not just them," Vivian admitted, sitting on the edge of the ottoman. "It's the general hum. The consensus that I should know better, that I'm foolish, that I've passed the expiration date for this kind of spontaneous, vibrant love. When we're alone, I forget the numbers. When we are public, the numbers are all people see. Ethan put down his cleaning cloth and walked over, sitting beside her. He didn't minimize her fear. He acknowledged the immense pressure she was under. Vivian, we survived the birthday dinner crisis. We survived Christmas. We survived Clara May's attempt to get us legally separated before we even bought a matching set of mugs, he said, a gentle humor lightening the tension. This is the last hurdle. We don't have to hide the fact that we've found something profound. In fact, if we hide it, we validate the idea that what we have is shameful or temporary. He took her hands, his grip firm. Valentine's Day is not for them. It's for us. It's for you to look around and realize that your life, your joy, is stronger than their whispers. We are not just defying their expectations. We are setting our own standard. We are proving passion holds no expiration date for ourselves. His conviction was the anchor she needed. She realized that retreating to a quiet corner would be a concession to her past fear. To truly claim her second act, she had to stand fully in the light. The day arrived with a sudden, beautiful clarity. February 14th, 2025. Ethan arrived at Azalea Manor that evening not just with flowers, but with a palpable energy. He was dressed formally, radiating excitement. Vivian wore a dress she hadn't touched in years, deep velvet, uncompromising and elegant. The location was the Mariner's Compass, the historic bookstore cafe where their intellectual connection had first blossomed. Ethan had rented the entire space for the evening, filling it not just with their friends, but with people from the community, acquaintances, colleagues, and yes, the inevitable scrutinizers. This was the public affirmation. It wasn't just a dinner, it was an exhibition of their lives. When they entered, the room was buzzing. The tables were set beautifully, surrounded by the towering shelves of dusty classics. Near the central fireplace, the unfinished canvas, now finished, and aptly named As Your Defiance, was prominently displayed. Clara May and her husband were there, looking nervous and slightly bewildered by the scale of the event. Mr. Harrington and his wife were also present, poised to observe and judge. The evening began with pleasant chatter. Ethan was the perfect host, circulating, making introductions, ensuring Vivian was comfortable. But Vivian knew the real test was coming. The moment when the age gap, the elephant in the room that perpetually defined their public perception, would need to be addressed, not ignored. After the dessert, Ethan stood near the canvas, tapping a wineglass lightly for attention. The noise subsided, the silence in the book-filled room becoming profound. Every eye turned to them. Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment of ultimate vulnerability. The climax of her internal conflict, the fear of public ridicule meeting the undeniable truth of her love. Ethan didn't launch into a grand defense. He didn't mention the words age gap or judgment. Instead, he told a story. I want to tell you about the night I first truly saw Vivian, he began, his voice clear and resonant, carrying easily through the high-ceilinged room. It was right here, among these books. She was discussing Rilke, discussing the idea of loving the questions themselves. And in that moment, I didn't see a number on a birth certificate. I saw a depth, a complexity, and a profound, beautiful mind that had been seeking connection, but had forgotten how to ask for it. He walked toward Vivian, his gaze unwavering, full of palpable affection. For years, Vivian lived beautifully and honorably, committed to duty and memory, he continued. But I found a woman who was ready for her second act. A powerful, vibrant woman who deserves to be seen, not through the lens of loss or expectation, but through the lens of her own immense capacity for joy. He reached into his pocket, not pulling out a piece of jewelry, but a folded, aged piece of paper. It was a passage from the collected poems of Rilke, the very lines that had anchored their first intimate discussion. She showed me this passage first. The one about letting everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going, no feeling is final. Ethan paused, his smile widening, encompassing the entire room, dissolving the barrier between them and the observers. Vivian Holloway taught me that vitality isn't a factor of youth, it's a factor of choice. And I want everyone here to know, unequivocally, I chose her. Not because she was easy, but because she is the most challenging, complex, and rewarding adventure I have ever undertaken. He then offered a toast, raising his glass not to love, but to choice. To choosing authenticity over caution, and vitality over safety. To our shared, powerful future. The response was immediate and overwhelming. It wasn't a polite clap. It was a wave of genuine applause, spurred on by the sheer, undeniable sincerity of his confession. The energy in the room shifted. The scrutiny, unable to find a foothold in the face of such raw, declared truth, crumbled. Clara May, tears streaming down her face, hurried over, hugging Vivian fiercely. "Oh, Viv, I was so worried. But I see it now. It's so real. You deserve this joy." The surrender in Clara May's voice was a victory far greater than any quiet retreat. The societal whispers had been definitively silenced, not by argument, but by the irrefutable evidence of a profound connection. For Vivian, standing there, bathed in the warmth of acceptance and Ethan's steady gaze, the last vestiges of fear evaporated. She had dared to defy conventional expectations, and the cost was not ridicule, but affirmation. The bond they had forged had proven stronger than any external pressure. The Valentine's Day event marked the end of their struggle against external judgment and the beginning of their life together, openly and without reservation. In the months that followed, their life settled into a rhythm dictated by partnership. Azalea Manor truly became a shared home, defined by collaboration. The structural changes Ethan had planned came to fruition. A new pergola in the garden, a vibrant studio space, and a feeling of movement that contrasted delightfully with the home's historic gravity. They traveled, they created, and they simply were. Vivian, now truly herself, found her voice and confidence reflected in Ethan's unwavering belief in her. She rediscovered her feminine confidence, realizing that her years of experience were not a liability, but a richness that Ethan cherished. Their love story became a quiet legend in the community, not for the scandal of the age gap, but for the profound authenticity of their commitment. They became the powerful affirmation that passion holds no expiration date, illustrating how one unexpected connection could lead to a vibrant, powerful second act. Years later, sitting on the porch swing at Azalea Manor, watching Ethan photograph the sunset over the newly vibrant garden structure they built together, Vivian smiled. The silver locket remained around her neck, gleaming softly, now a symbol of her entire, rich, and complex life, past and present, interwoven. She never expected to fall in love after 50, especially not with a man significantly younger, whose optimism challenged her decade of solitude. But it had happened. It was a profound, undeniable love, never planned, but simply inevitable. Her vibrant, powerful second act was not just underway. It was a masterpiece of defiance and joy. She had chosen the sunrise, and the light illuminated everything. The warmth generated within the mariner's compass on Valentine's night did not dissipate with the lighting of dawn. It settled over Azalea Manor like a soft, permanent heat, melting away the last, lingering frosts of Vivian's solitude. The public affirmation had been more than a social triumph. It was an exorcism of the decade of enforced emotional containment. The sheer, undeniable sincerity of Ethan's confession, the focus on choice and vitality over chronology, had disarmed the skeptics. Vivian often thought back to the moment Clara May had dissolved into tears, not of pity, but of pure relief and joy. That hug, tight and genuine, symbolized the societal pressure lifting. It wasn't that the community had stopped seeing the difference between Vivian and Ethan. It was that they had started seeing the connection first. Their relationship was no longer a spectacle of defiance, but a celebrated reality. The months that followed were dedicated to the art of cohabitation and creation. Spring arrived, and with it, the intense planning and execution of the garden redesign. Ethan, fueled by boundless energy, treated Azalea Manor less like a historical relic and more like a shared, ongoing art installation. He had a specific vision for the back garden, which Vivian had always kept prim and rigidly organized. He wanted wildness, deliberate untidiness, and color saturation, an echo of the bold strokes on azure defiance. They spent hours together in the dirt, hands grimy, laughing over failed attempts at building the arched pergola. This wasn't the refined intellectual pursuit of Rilke. This was physical, grounding labor, and Vivian discovered a deep, simple satisfaction in shaping the earth with him. "This is what I love about you, Viv," Ethan remarked one sweltering April afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow as he secured a trellis. "You approach planting a row of snapdragons with the same meticulous commitment you bring to analyzing Kantian ethics. No half measures." Vivian smiled, arranging a cluster of deep purple pansies near the foundation. "I suppose if one is going to commit, one should commit fully. I learnt that lesson late, but thoroughly." The profound connection that initially sparked over shared philosophy now manifested in the mundane details of daily life. The physical labor served as a powerful metaphor. They were tearing down old, unnecessary structures, the walls of fear, the rigidity of routine, and building new ones designed for growth and sunlight. Vivian realized how deeply the decade of loss had impacted her perception of her own body. For 10 years, she had viewed herself as an intellectual vessel, a steward of memory, entirely separate from her sensual identity. Ethan, through the sheer constancy of his admiration and desire, dismantled this sterile self-image. He didn't just find her beautiful, he found her experience beautiful. One evening, as Vivian prepared for bed, she caught sight of her reflection. She saw the lines around her eyes, the traces of silver in her dark hair, the slight change in her posture since the first encounter at the Mariner's Compass. Before Ethan, those signs of passing time had felt like marks of obsolescence. Now they felt like maps of a journey he was genuinely fascinated to explore. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his cheek resting against her shoulder. "You have a new light in you, Viv. It's like watching a star reignite." "It's simply reflection, darling," she murmured, leaning back into his solid strength. "You are the light source." "No," he insisted gently, turning her to face him. "I just helped clear away the clouds. The light was always there. It's the light of a woman who knows exactly who she is, what she deserves, and isn't afraid to claim it." His words were the ultimate affirmation of her recovered feminine confidence. He didn't idealize youth. He celebrated complexity. The difference in their years, the very thing the community whispered about, became the texture of their intimacy. He found power in her maturity, and she found liberation in his unburdened optimism. The silver locket, still worn daily, was no longer a burden of the past. It was a testament to the fact that her history had shaped, but not defined, her future. As the garden project progressed into high summer, so did their professional collaboration. Azure Defiance had garnered significant local attention, not just for its bold style, but for the story behind its completion. Vivian's precise, grounded strokes meeting Ethan's sweeping, energetic vision. This led to Ethan securing a significant commission, a mural for the new Coastal Arts Center, a project that would require months of focused work and a sizable advancement of funds. The subject of the mural was, predictably, the local coastline. But Ethan wanted to capture the fierce underlying energy of the waves at Sullivan's Cove Pier, the place where Vivian had made her ultimate confession of vitality. Vivian, utilizing her sharp organizational skills and deep knowledge of the community, became his project manager and research director. Their partnership was a seamless blend of art and logistics. I need the blue of absolute commitment, Viv, Ethan told her one afternoon. Blending pigments in the makeshift studio, his hands stained with indigo, the kind of blue that says, "This is it. There is no turning back." That would be the blue of defiance, wouldn't it? Vivian responded, checking the inventory list of required canvases. The shade we settled on for azure defiance. It's a color of choice, not compromise. Their professional intertwining solidified the structure of their life together, proving that their bond extended far beyond the romantic. They were a formidable team, professionally and personally. Yet the societal pushback, though dramatically quieted, hadn't vanished completely, took on subtler, more insidious forms, often manifesting through the actions of acquaintances who were simply struggling to reconcile their conventional worldview with the vibrant reality of Vivian and Ethan. One such instance occurred in late May at a small gallery viewing downtown. Harrington, a local attorney who had been particularly judgmental at the Christmas open house, approached Vivian. He was impeccably dressed, radiating polite skepticism. "Vivian, you look marvelous," Harrington said, his tone overly solicitous. His eyes darting to Ethan, who was engaged in conversation nearby. "Truly marvelous. You found a renewed vigor. It's quite infectious." "Thank you, Harrington," Vivian replied evenly, recognizing the veiled condescension. He leaned in, adopting a confidential air. "I must admit, when Clara May first mentioned this arrangement, I had my concerns. Practical concerns, mind you. But you seem happy. I only hope, for your sake, that this youthful energy remains, that he finds your shared interests sustaining in the long term." It was a classic microaggression, the subtle planting of doubt. The implication that their relationship was a temporary fling, sustained only by youthful energy and bound by an inevitable expiration date dictated by the chronological difference. In the past, Vivian might have retreated, muttered a vague response, and allowed the seed of doubt to take root internally. She was fortified now. She had chosen authenticity, and authenticity demanded truth. She met Harrington's gaze, her eyes sharp and utterly devoid of fear. "Harrington," she said, her voice dropping slightly so that only he could hear, carrying that cool, high integrity that made her so formidable in a debate. "Ethan doesn't find our interests merely sustaining, he finds them profound. And as for his youthful energy, he channels that into creation, into building a future, and into ensuring that the woman he loves feels vital and cherished every single day." She paused, letting the weight of her convictions settle upon him. "You view our relationship through the lens of duration and practicality, judging it by years. I view it through the lens of depth and shared experience. And frankly, Harrington, the sheer depth of our connection outweighs any number of years you might wish to count against us." Harrington blinked, momentarily stunned by her directness. He hadn't expected the reserved, grieving Vivian to wield such powerful, unapologetic confidence. He stumbled through a brief, awkward remark about the weather and quickly retreated, avoiding Ethan's gaze entirely. That moment was a quieter yet equally significant confirmation of the Valentine's Day victory. Vivian no longer needed Ethan to defend their relationship. She possessed the internal resolve to defend her choices herself. The summer unfolded in a burst of creation. The coastal mural was unveiled to critical acclaim, solidifying Ethan's reputation and further erasing any lingering suspicion about his motivations. Simultaneously, the garden at Azalea Manor reached its peak beauty. The new pergola, draped in climbing roses and wisteria, provided a shaded retreat that felt both ancient and brand new, a perfect symbol of Vivian's life. It was in this space, one humid evening in July, that they shared a conversation that cemented the final transformation of Vivian's internal landscape. They were sitting under the pergola, watching the fireflies flicker over the camellias. Vivian reached up and touched the silver locket, a gesture that was now entirely unconscious. "I wore this for so long as a reminder of what was required of me," she confessed quietly. "Duty, memory, preservation. It felt like armor against the world, but it was also a cage. Ethan reached out and gently placed his hand over hers, encompassing the locket. It's a powerful memory, Viv, and you honor that history by carrying it, not by letting it stop you from collecting new moments. When we started, I was terrified that this relationship, with its unexpectedness and its difference, would somehow dishonor the past. That the vibrancy you brought would feel like a betrayal. Zan sighed softly. The only dishonor would have been remaining stagnant, out of a mistaken sense of loyalty to sorrow. You weren't meant for a life in grayscale, Vivian. You are color. Vivian looked out at the garden. She remembered the carefully structured life she had maintained, quiet dinners, predictable routines, the absence of spontaneity. That life was safe, yes, but it was also profoundly small. Ethan had shattered the architecture of her solitude, not violently, but gently, introducing possibility into every room. She realized that the love they shared was not defined by their age difference, but by the shared recognition that they had both found exactly what they needed at the precise moment they needed it, a convergence of maturity and vitality, wisdom and optimism. The final, undeniable proof of her transformation came not through grand pronouncements, but through a deeply personal act. Vivian, inspired by the creative chaos of the studio and encouraged by Ethan's persistent faith in her unused potential, decided to take up the paintbrush herself. She wasn't an architect or a sculptor, but she had always possessed a keen eye for light and composition. She began working on a small series of watercolors depicting the subtle changes of light in azalea manner. They were delicate, precise, and filled with a hidden warmth that reflected her inner state. When she finally showed them to Ethan, she felt a nervousness she hadn't experienced since she was a teenager. Ethan studied the paintings carefully, moving his head to catch the light. "These are astonishing, Viv. They capture the spirit of this house, the history, but also the present, the life. I thought they might be too simple. Too domestic," she said, her voice shaky. "They are profound because they are honest," Ethan countered. "You are painting what you feel, not what you think you should feel. That requires immense courage." Her capacity for joy, once buried under layers of duty, had been rediscovered and expressed visually. It was a tangible sign that the second act was not merely a romantic pursuit, but a complete renaissance of self. The seasons turned, cycling back toward another year. The whispers had long since faded into admiration. Vivian and Ethan were now simply known as the couple, the artist, and the intellect, the duo whose combined energy had revitalized a segment of the community. Clara May, now their most fervent advocate, often joked about her initial anxieties. "I was a fool, Viv," she admitted one afternoon over coffee. "I was so stuck in the mold of what love after 50 should look like, two people settling into predictable comfort, that I couldn't recognize passion when it hit you like a wave." "It's easy to confuse safety with happiness, Clara May," Vivian observed, sipping her coffee, her eyes soft. "I lived that confusion for 10 years. Their story became a silent, powerful affirmation to others in their age group, a permission slip for spontaneity, a reminder that expectation holds no authority over the heart. The true beauty of their enduring love lay in its normalcy. After the initial hurdle of public scrutiny, their daily life settled into the rhythm of any deeply committed couple: shared chores, intellectual debates over dinner, quiet nights of companionship, and the continuous joy of shared creation. The age difference, once a chasm viewed by society, was now merely a detail, irrelevant in the face of their complementary spirits. Years passed, the milestones quiet but profound. Ethan established his studio permanently in the renovated sunroom. Vivian published a small, well-received collection of essays on architectural preservation, subtly including reflections on how tearing down old barriers can be the most crucial act of preservation. One late autumn afternoon, perhaps 7 or 8 years after their initial encounter, Vivian sat on the porch swing at Azalea Manor. The camellias were preparing for their winter bloom, and the garden structure, now weathered and integrated into the landscape, stood as a beautiful monument to their collaboration. Vivian was in her late 50s now. She was still elegant, but the reserved posture was gone, replaced by a relaxed, confident grace. Ethan, now in his mid-40s, retained his radiant optimism, but it was tempered with a deep, settled wisdom earned through commitment. He emerged from the house carrying 2 steaming mugs, his movements still dynamic and easy. He sat next to her, bumping her shoulder playfully. "The light is perfect today," he noted, observing the sunset over the horizon, already planning how he might capture the specific shade of gold hitting the pergola. Vivian leaned her head against his shoulder. The silver locket, a soft gleam against her collarbone, felt neither heavy nor symbolic of sacrifice. It was simply part of her. "You know, I remember thinking, right before the encounter, the Mariner's Compass, that my story was essentially finished," Vivian mused softly. "That the era of passion belonged to the past, that I had exhausted my capacity for true joy." Ethan laced his fingers through hers, the warmth familiar and grounding. "We all write the narrative we think we deserve, until someone comes along and hands us a better pen." "You didn't hand me a pen, darling," Vivian corrected, turning her head to meet his gaze. "You handed me a canvas and insisted I use the boldest colors." She realized the true victory wasn't just finding love, but fully accepting her right to it. She had rediscovered not just romantic love, but her own vitality and capacity for joy, proving to herself and to the small gossiping world that passion holds no expiration date. What began as a surprising friendship transformed into a profound, undeniable love, never planned, but simply the inevitable, vibrant conclusion to her powerful second act. She looked out at the settling light, satisfied, content, and utterly, profoundly alive. The future, once a blank space, was now richly painted, and she was ready for every masterpiece they would create together. Her life, finally, was exactly as it should be. Smash the like button, then subscribe to level up your feed.